Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Can UFO revelations from the U.S. military be trusted? Can you really be sexually assaulted by a paranormal entity? Do all dogs go to heaven?
Greetings and welcome to the 858th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and those heterogeneous questions came from my co-host, partner in paranormal adventures, and dad, Paul. And today, we bring you an open line show to answer your questions. We welcome your calls today. It's 401-766-1240. Or you can email Paul at behindtheparanormal.com or contact us via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram for those who are a little shy in the vocal area.
And we're pleased, I hope, in a minute, to welcome back the ever-popular Shane Sirois, our favorite guest co-host, who adds so much to these open line shows. Having a little trouble connecting with him this morning. We're not quite to the point where he comes down to the studio from New Hampshire just yet because of the COVID thing. Hopefully soon we'll be back, but we're relying on Skype today, and we hope to have him back on the line here in a minute. So let us begin as Ben tries to raise Shane here.
I believe we actually...
Hello.
Oh, there he is. Okay.
There he is. Yeah, right in the nick of time, Shane.
Yeah, right in the nick of time. Okay, well, welcome to the show, Shane. Say hello to the nice people.
Hello, nice people.
All right. So let's begin kind of with the first question that we asked regarding UFO revelations, and we will start appropriately with our good friend and listener in Colombia, South America, Peter. Peter here. Okay, let's.
Sure. So Peter writes to us. Regarding the Pentagon announcement, I agree that this is some sort of less than honest effort, obviously. My question is why? Why now, and what is the real objective?
Now, the Pentagon announcement being that there is a new group looking into UFOs, okay? That was preceded, of course, as anybody turns on the TV, because they play it ad nauseum, those Navy photos taken from fighter aircraft of a UFO-like figure, which was referred to as the Tic Tac shaped UFO.
Oh, yep.
And as I've said, I'd like to know how much the Italian company that makes Tic Tacs is paying them to make that kind of analogy. But anyway, that's the background of what we're talking about. So, Shane, any thoughts on whether this is legit or not?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, first it was the Navy, and now the Pentagon, which is pretty incredible. But if you're gonna, they were always concerned, about a crazy reaction from the public or whatever. But really, if you're gonna do it and you're worried about that, now's the time to do it, because everyone's distracted with all this other nonsense that's going on. Could be a reason, but I think it just, people are starting to open their eyes, and I mean it's becoming more and more obvious. I mean, last year or this past year, the amount of sightings is incredible. In 2019 and this year, I mean, there's just been so many more sightings and so many more video recordings of these strange objects, all over,
including our own.
Yes, exactly. I mean, North Carolina is going crazy with these orange balls, but all around. I mean, even New Hampshire, there's been so many silver discs, being spotted, and then this big giant thing that I photographed above my property, and was reported. Even a police officer reported it to me. This giant, the same thing that I photographed, but they saw it probably a lot closer because they said it was ginormous. Really, really huge. So, I mean, but there's no denying it anymore. There's no hiding it. So, I think now would be a good time where everyone's distracted with other things,
Ben?
I haven't had a chance to read it at all, really. Have either of you had a chance to read the document?
Yeah, I have. Some of it, anyway.
I'm not sure. I've wanted to, and I've heard mention, but I want to basically find it myself before I kind of go off the cuff of certain details in it.
Yeah, very, very sensible.
I didn't read it either. I heard the statement and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so before I kind of jump into a rabbit hole of speculation, which is really all we can do, right? And up until this point, how honest has our government really been with us? Period. And that's kind of the sort of perspective I think we should all take. And what's really fascinating about it is it's kind of taken as a given. I think in sort of a time of chaos, if anything is to get done sort of behind the scenes, you kind of have to keep people looking away at different things. So I mean, look at all of anything that's happened since March, really. And just everything that's kind of been going on, there's a laundry list of things, and it seems like every other day, week, month, there's some new sort of crisis. And I would argue that it's partially to do with our 24-hour news cycles, that it's like you have to have something to report on. There always has to be a crisis, and there's sort of this actually a very good friend of ours who is getting his PhD in political science, specifically in studying the sort of psychological effects of sort of politics, essentially, is really fascinating to me. And occasionally I'll listen to some of his lectures, and there's a really fascinating sort of thing, and it's all meant to kind of divide. Everything out there is meant to sort of divide you in some way, shape, or form. And I would argue that this whole sort of, I know that we're in the middle of many crises right now, but by the way, UFOs are real, and here's what we have now. It's like, okay, well, what's the goal, right? There's no tangible reason for it. Right? There's no sort of big demand by a majority to say, hey, we need the truth about it because 75% of the population of the United States believes in extraterrestrials anyway. It's like, so what is the goal other than more chaos? I would argue.
Well, I tend to agree with that. Now, Shane may very well be right. He usually is, and when he's discussing the the matter of this is the time to do the revelations. But I also agree that I think it's a time when everyone is distracted, and that's what makes me so suspicious about this.
Yeah, because why couldn't they do this a year ago?
Yeah, well, I mean,
the year before that,
having worked with military intelligence, although albeit on a very low level, you do kind of get a sense of how they work. First of all, the government is in smithereens. So is the Pentagon, in the sense that there are many. There are factions, the different services at times compete with one another, and the Navy always seems to have charge of UFO stuff, always has. And there do seem to be agendas. I know that when and all of us have been on panels at UFO conventions here, the three of us, and the subject of disclosure will always come up. And everybody says, oh, yeah, it's coming soon. The most eminent names in the field will say it's coming soon. But I feel like a fool. I have to sit there and say, well, I think it's naive to think that this is coming soon. Whatever it may be, the information that's released, I just don't believe it will be accurate, complete, or even true in even some ways. I'm very cynical about this disclosure thing. There's always some agenda, and there are competing departments within the government who want to have this or that agenda, and they may be competing agendas. So I don't know, and the timing of the timing of all of this is just weird. The whole COVID thing, all the political nonsense, the riots. I mean, it's too coincidental to me. I don't know really why it's happening, and I don't want to get into stuff that's non-paranormal. But the UFO thing, I don't trust the information, and we'll just see. And I will say this too: the Pentagon has always been studying UFOs. That's right. Part of their job. So this is nothing new. It'll be done under different project names, sometimes in different places, occasionally with different people. But it's always been studied. So why they're coming out about this now may very well be because what Shane pointed out, the number of sightings is tremendous. A lot of photography. We ourselves had that amazing sighting a year ago May, and got it on video. And anyway, I think there's a lot more to it than simply a disclosure.
Right.
I also agree that with all the other nonsense going on, all this chaotic crap that's going on, it's all politically driven, whether it be by the media or or whatever. It's all for political gain and agendas, and it's disgusting. And I never talk about this stuff, but I did on the show Friday night, and I just usually try to stay neutral, but I've had it. It's been disgusting. So I kind of went off on a show the other night about all this nonsense, but I just don't know how making that statement, how that plays into the political scene at all. I'm trying to figure that out, but whether it is just to add more chaos to the pot, I guess.
Well, we'll see. All right. Well, let's move on to a furrier subject.
Oh, there was actually more to Peter's email.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Oh, Peter, we don't want to see. He always asks good questions.
Well, it's not. Well, it's a speculation on his part, which actually makes a lot of sense. I did a quick little read through of it, and he says his speculation is as follows: it is merely a mechanism to justify military spending. Notice that the task force is interested in a threat to national security. If there is no threat, no dollars. Ultimately, the task force will conclude something like, we don't know what it is exactly. It could be Russia, China, or the Klingon Empire. We don't know. But after studying the problem, we have proposed special defense systems and countermeasures to deal with the potential threat, whatever it may be, quote unquote, which will only cost the taxpayers $90 gazillion. Checks, please. And by the way, please overlook the fact that the Air Force, after years of studying, concluded in 1969 that there was no threat to national security.
Well, Peter may be a little darker than I am on this, but I think he's got some points.
Yes.
All right. Excuse me. Anyway, the furrier subject here, Ben, if you would, this is from Tara in West Rentham, Massachusetts, right in our home listening area.
Sure thing.
Okay, thank you.
I will take this from you. So Tara writes to us, do animals have an afterlife? I really enjoyed your book Behind the Paranormal and your chapter on animals, but you really didn't come out and say that they have an afterlife, especially pets. What do you think?
Well, we did report on a person who had a pet ghost, and that was, although it was not really one of our cases, it was in North Carolina. However, I remember we didn't bring it out in the chapter as such, mentioning afterlife and all this sort of thing, because as regular listeners know, we don't usually approach it in that way. To us, there's just life, and there really isn't any afterlife or past lives or anything, because Einstein's general theory of special theory of relativity, what was relative was time. There is no past, no future, if he's right. And so a lot of old classic terms become irrelevant, such as afterlife, because it's not after anything. Anyway, but the point being, do animals survive bodily death? I guess is the question. And yeah, I mean, everything is always alive. The metaphor we always use is a leaf falling off a tree. You got a humongous oak tree with a gazillion leaves on it. One falls off. You're the whole tree. One life falls off. So what? Maybe it's a minor inconvenience. There's, having talked about UFOs already on the show, there is some evidence from discussions we've had with people like Stanton Friedman and other major people in the UFO field, that aliens, if they are from other planets, and these really are nuts and bolts crap, and when they crash, as at Roswell, and the bodies are found, they don't come back for them, seemingly. It's like it's a minor inconvenience because of the leaf theory kind of thing. Maybe this is known to other forms of life, and we think it is. So, yeah, I mean, everything is always alive. I think the principle in the quantum mechanics about the multiverse is that everything that is possible does exist somewhere or somewhen in the various parts of the multiverse, which are all simultaneously existing. So, what's not possible seems to be death. How can you die when you have so many aspects, or as I call it in my last book, facets of ourselves are living in usually a physical manner at some point, everywhere, every when, not everywhere, but in many, many millions of facets and different parts of the multiverse. So yeah, I mean, if Artichoke the parakeet, keels over in the cage one day, I mean, it's probably, yeah, I mean, there are many, many versions of the same creature, and it's really all part of ourselves too. So yeah, you can't die. So you have a beloved pet, sure. Yeah, I was thinking that yesterday. We have a cat he lives next door to your mom and I, Ben, but you know him. Matter of fact, your future wife named him.
My current wife?
Your current wife. Well, she was future at the time she named him. So anyway, we call him Tobias B. Broder or Toby. And he's a big black cat, and he's just... he comes and he eats, and he visits with me, and he's just very, very loving and friendly. And yeah, I mean, he'll always be with us, with me particularly, because he likes me a lot. And so I mean, I just see it as one huge life, and I don't see past and future. I don't see death. I just see life. I really experienced that because I've thought of this so often. I don't know. So Shane, what say you on pets?
Yeah.
How's Hank doing, by the way? big old German Shepherd.
Yeah, he's a jealous boy today. We got the youngest grandbaby spent the night, and he gets real jealous. So he's acting like a foolish dog. So well, Donna Philly, the Connecticut house, and we talk about her and her house. All the time. And
Litchfield Triangle case.
Yes. And so if I remember correctly, she's seen one of her deceased dogs, but she saw half of it near the food bowl, if I remember correctly.
The half they could eat?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I've seen photographs from some people that have called me to their home to investigate or whatever, things going on, where they've taken photos and had like cats near the food bowl that were dead, but they were translucent, but they were clearly there. Things of that nature. Me and my wife actually were called to a house where this teenage girl was being, they believed there was something attacking her or whatever, or attached to her, and there ended up being two things there. There was a parasite there, but there was also what felt like an animal, and like a dog or something, and it would come up behind everybody, and everybody there. It was another group, a large investigative group that needed my help, so I went to help them. And so me and my wife went there. So they had like 3 or 4 people, and then it was me and my wife. Every single one of us got bumped. You know how like a dog will nudge you with his nose?
Yeah.
Right on the rear end. Every single one of us. And it was a good push too, but it felt just like that. Like it was an upward push, and just like a dog nose, and so and that felt different than the parasite. So they had like 2 things going on there, but it was pretty strange, but for sure, I mean, there's everything, like you said, everything is alive, and it was, as long as we have energy and emotion, and you can have bleed overs between the parallels, and between different worlds or whatever. So yeah, certainly. I'm with that.
Ben, thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. What's kind of cool is there's sort of this theme. We might have touched on it at some point in time, but never really kind of ever fully expanded on, which is sort of how we for lack of better words, life kind of form bonds with a lot of things around us, right? So not just people, but daily activities, right? Something that kind of brings us comfort or routine, like some of the cases that we've had where guy's walking down the stairs and haunting his own house because he does the same thing every day.
Yep.
But it's a bond not just with an object or another person or an animal. It's with that activity, and these sort of bonds, I think, kind of. I'm trying to pick the right words here, because it's a really esoteric subject. I've never really had the time to kind of think about until this very moment. Essentially, we form bonds with a lot of things, and just from personal experience, I formed a lot of bonds with you two, as well as with my wife. You know, our two cats. You know, our house, our sort of life. And I think when one sort of pursues life in a way, in sort of pursuing these sort of very positive bonds and relationships that are kind of being built, I think it leaves sort of echoes, almost. You know, something kind of good that exists. I would argue that not only would it be for us in a personal sense as human beings, but I would say with, you know, any sort of living creature does kind of the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if, you know, let's say, like, you know, you have a pet that's deceased. You know, sure, you formed a bond with it. I would argue that it also formed a bond with you, right? Because how would they sort of go about life without knowing, oh, this person's going to feed me and take care of me. Oh, this person's going to, you know, clean me, keep me clean, whatever, make sure I don't die. All of this stuff, you know, that's kind of a big deal, right? It's like, you know, if you're a parent or if you're a child and you're like, oh, well, I'm forming a bond with my parents because they're keeping me alive. But, you know, you would argue that
we did all right with you, I guess.
Yeah.
More or less.
I'd say, yeah, pretty good job. You know,
good.
like an A.
Yeah.
But, you know, the point still stands. You know, arguably, yeah, I don't want to anthropomorphize here because you could say that, you know, oh, well, it's an animal, you know, they don't have, you know, sort of the same kind of brains that we do. But then we kind of take it a step further and say, well, what's consciousness then? You know, why is it limited only to humans, right? And that's kind of the questions that we don't have the answers to, which is consciousness only sort of allowed for humans and nothing else? Because I would say that that's not true.
No, I'd agree.
And that sort of brings up, okay, well, if we form bonds, that would argue that there is consciousness there. You know, how would it, if an animal was just only acting on instinct and was like, okay, well, this person's feeding me, I like this person, you know, because they feed me, then what's the point of them even interacting with anybody else at all? Unless they get food from it. And, you know, this kind of gets down to behavioral science, but, you know, the thought is still there that, you know, if it's just only acting out of instinct, then where does consciousness come into all of that? And so, you know, it's a very long, roundabout way to get to the answer to this, which is, do animals have an afterlife? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to call it that, yeah.
Right. Well, then you have to ask, what is afterlife anyway?
Yeah.
And is there an afterlife? Because if you break that apart, in and of itself, that would suggest that life ends. And does it end? And I would say no. I would say that pursuing life every day and in every way, I didn't mean to rhyme that, would essentially be living.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
so, yeah, on that note, let's take our bottom of the hour break here, if I can get through it. And you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno and our special guest co-host Shane Sirois today. It's open lines on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. We'll be right back with your questions.
The night is alive. Join us and take a walk on the weird side when you tune in to the Kingdom of Nye, hosted by Heather Wade. The finest in late night talk. Listen live free weeknights starting at 9 p.m. Pacific time at thekingdomofnye.com, talkstreamlive.com, and the Paranormal Radio app. Wanna take a ride?
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
And welcome back to Behind the Paranormal on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM. And we're back here with, of course, Ben, who's also acting as producer today, and our good friend Shane Sirois, who is our brother-in-arms and our favorite guest co-host, especially for these open line shows. So let's, before we leave Tara's question, I just wanted to cite the section of the book that she mentions, the book being Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong, by Ben and myself, published 2017 by Schiffer Books, and it's still in stores, I believe. And there is a section that was very interesting, animal ghost story, and it was from. There's a book. People of my generation would remember it. I don't know if anybody else does, but Lad, a Dog. It was a story of a dog. That was, a lot of young people liked the story. Back in whenever.
Never heard of it, but I'll take it.
I should have read it to you as a kid. You were deprived.
No, strictly Lord of the Rings.
Anyway, the dog that was based on, I believe, was a dog owned by the author, Albert Payson Terhune, I think he pronounced the name. And he lived in New Jersey. And Rex was the dog. And Rex translated, or died, as some people would say. And people would come over to his house after this, and they would... One day they would just had dinner, and they were sitting around the living room. And the people said, boy, your dog sure loves you. And there was no dog at his feet. But they saw Rex, who was lying at the feet of Mr. Terhune, as he always did. And I suppose that's one of the ideas that gave him the notion for that book, was the faithfulness of this dog. And I don't know if he ever saw it himself, but other people would see it, walking with him and that kind of thing. I thought that was kind of interesting. Couldn't see it himself, but other people did. So just on that note, I guess we can go to the next question. But I think that's rather not just charming, but rather heartwarming.
Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah, it's definitely a tonal shift from the first part of the show.
Yes. Well, that's what we like to do on Open Lines. We're all over the multiverse.
Yeah, actually. Speaking of, we have Mark writing to us from South Africa, Durban, South Africa, that writes with a very simple question, which is, who or what is the Slender Man, and have you ever seen him?
Oh, not lately. We used to have coffee. No. The Slender Man is one of a number of, I suppose you could call, archetypal figures who have come out lately. Now, the Slender Man in particular, we did a whole show on him with Nick Redfern, okay? And it's an internet phenomenon. And we've talked about the notion of urban legends on the show. And, somebody hears something from somebody. The elephant that sat on the Volkswagen, or somebody who picked up a rat and thought it was a dog and took it home. That kind of.
I remember Mom sent me that email once, like forever ago.
Yeah, that actually happened in our family. We didn't actually pick up a rat, but I mean, someone that your mom knew in the law profession had supposedly, she heard from someone, had picked up some kind of a Australian wombat or something that had come into Providence on a ship. Providence being a minor port, but still you have ships all over the place. And they took it home, thought it was a dog, and apparently it was they could have killed her. But I guess it appreciated the attack. But if this even happened, it's an old-time urban legend. So I think that the Slender Man thing has part of that to it. On the other hand, I have run into the man in the checkered shirt in 3 different cases, including one in Montreal, Canada, Rhode Island, and also in Connecticut. I've actually seen it myself, kind of ducking behind a tree or a truck or something. And that is another one of these common archetypal things. The little girl with blonde hair, sometimes with flowers in her hair, is another classic thing. I ran into that in Cumberland, Rhode Island, right here in our area, in a case in the 1990s. Shane, I think you were involved in that. Yes. I don't know. Yeah, down there. It's written up in Footsteps in the Attic from the 2002 that we wrote. So anyway, these things do tend to recur, and very often they turn out to be parasites. So Shane, what say you? I know you've run into all kinds of fun things like this.
I agree with you. Parasites are funny. They'll take on the shape of a little blonde girl just to get you to pay attention to it,
right.
To start talking to it. And once you start, oh, Sally, we're home. Sally, we're going to work. And you're feeding that attention. And then next thing you know, it's not Sally anymore. It's destroying your life. But
yep.
Now with these different things like Slender Man, I started off like, was it a game or something on the internet? It was something to that
something
effect.
like that. Yeah, Nick spelled it out.
The history of Slender Man is a dumb one. It initially started on an image board website where they basically did a contest, and it was like a drawing contest, and so they're like, okay, someone create the next big cryptid or whatever, and so someone drew a man in a suit with no face, who was very tall, had occasionally pictured with like black tentacles or whatever coming from the back. And then people just started writing stories about it and named it Slender Man. And then eventually, over time, it ended up on this website called Creepypasta, which is essentially the 21st century equivalent of folklore or urban legends. And there are some pretty spooky reads on there, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But essentially it kind of sprung from there, and it took on kind of a life of its own with this little internet game that somebody made that was called it was called the 7 Letters or something like that. And I remember when I was in college, we took a class, like one of my classes, and we studied the sound design of it, because it's a crappy little game, and you could download it, and it's like for free. I don't know if, or maybe you still can't. I think they ended up monetizing it at some point in time, but initially, in 2013, it was 2013, you could just get it for free. And we studied it because it was very low resolution, just didn't look great, but it did this amazing thing with sound where there was no music in it whatsoever, and the goal was to find these little 7 letters, and once you found all 7, then you completed the game. But throughout the game, you would turn around and you would see Slender Man following you, but it wouldn't move, but basically every time you moved and didn't keep an eye on it, it would shift from tree to tree and follow you all the way. So it was pretty creepy. And so it was just kind of a little internet thing for a while, and it gradually picked up speed until there was that case a few years back with those preteen girls who ended up stabbing their friend I forget how many times, and basically said, we did this for quote unquote the Slender Man unquote, for some sort of weird reason. It was really, really horrible, and I believe the 2 girls ended up in a mental institution afterwards.
Yeah, that's what parasites do.
Pretty much. So it's one of those things where it's the quintessential 21st century ghost story, right? Where it kind of takes on a life of its own, and then it just gets too big too quickly. And it's sort of like the modern day equivalent of old paperback books about Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot or something like that. Back in the early 1900s, when you had these basically these little penny dreadfuls of just different monsters and things like that. This is the 21st century equivalent of that. And so there are sort of unsubstantiated reports of people seeing it, but I would throw my weight behind the argument of parasites will take on any form in any way to get what they want.
Well, one of the things here, there are several levels to this. Everything we've said doesn't mean that people are not having real experiences. They may be familiar with the Slender Man thing on the internet, and then they see something which may or may not be paranormal, and they interpret it as Slender Man. Okay? Now, I actually have photographs of parasites that are long and thin, look almost like lightning, because that's the way you see them through the membrane.
Yeah, put a suit on it and you're done.
Precisely, yeah. But there are also the notion of thought forms, or tulpas.
I thought about that as I finished my thought. So
you thought about the thought forms, okay.
I did.
Good, well done. But just briefly, Tibetan Buddhist monks will sometimes use this as a spiritual exercise. And I've actually seen a group of college students in Canada one time. Okay, we're going to come up with a story and project it, concentrate on it. Then the story was of some person who was alive hundreds of years ago and died and was now a ghost, and they would actually have seances, and they would get reactions. Which I thought it was parasites. I told them not to do it, because nobody listened to me anyway in those days. I don't know about how many listen now. But in any case, it was you can apparently create thought forms of this kind, or tulpas. So with everybody concentrating on a story, they might have created something that is equivalent to a reality. Shane, any thoughts on that further?
Yeah, I agree. I've actually done that experiment a few times, and it was successful.
Oh, yeah, you're crazier than I am. I know. Reverse engineering some of these phenomena.
But, whenever, I know, like Ben said, those girls that tried to kill their schoolmate or their classmate or whatever, but there was a lot of younger kids and younger teenagers that were, obsessed with the Slender Man thing. And but it also, being creepy as it is, whenever anything strikes you emotionally like that and puts that kind of, terror in you, anything that has, a strong effect on you emotionally can feed these things, and mostly the parasites. But, and the more you talk about it, and the more people are exposed to these things, and the Dogman phenomenon, there's more and more people seeing these things, and the ones that are seeing them said that the thought before they heard of them, and they said the thought of seeing them would be the most horrible thing they could even imagine, and then they end up witnessing it, or seeing one near their house or on their property, and that seems to be happening more and more. But there's you have all kinds of different types of things too,
Yeah.
But exactly what they are. I think a lot of times they are parasites. But then again, where we have these paranormal flap areas, and we know anything can come through those areas when those components are in place. So you never know just what they are, But
yeah,
I think
we've experienced it.
Yes.
So I remember we've done some great shows with not only Nick Redfern, but also Linda Godfrey, who is probably the foremost expert on cryptids, at least of the dog variety in North America. And her descriptions of what actually happens when you encounter one can be very interesting. You'll get a look from the creature as if, hey, I know all about this, but you don't. And sort of almost superior kind of thing.
Smug.
Very smug cryptids. I don't know.
Yeah,
So, but people can look back for shows with Linda. And I want to get, this is a little long, but I think we have time for it. It's about a sighting from Elaine. I believe Elaine is in New York State.
Sure thing. So Lena writes to us. I can't remember how old I was. Probably in middle school in the early 1960s. I saw a large object round in the front with a blunt back end flying silently. It was close enough that I could see the bottom and not the top, but it wasn't overhead, probably a quarter of a mile away. It was as big as a large jet in diameter. The color was a dark gray, and there were pipes and such on the bottom, not smooth. I remember going in the house and telling my father about it, and he said, "Oh, that's an experimental hovercraft flying to the Niagara Falls Air Force Base."
Well, there is no such thing.
Yeah, right. I believed him and gave it no more thought. One day, a couple of years ago, I was listening to Tim Beckley, and the people were discussing that a lot of people seem to see their first UFO at age 12. Memory popped into my mind. I recently asked my elderly mother, 89 years old, if she remembered me asking about it, and she replied, "Oh, you mean the UFO? That's it." I didn't mention that the object wasn't high in the sky, and no need to tip my head to look back at it. Just looked straight out to see it, and it was low enough that I wouldn't have seen it today from the spot because the trees have grown so high. I forgot to tell you that the object was flying slowly, slower than a plane. I watched it for a few minutes until it disappeared into the distance. This was also out in the country, farms and woodland.
Okay, I should correct myself. There is an Air Force Reserve station near Niagara Falls, but I mean, it's as far I remember it, and it's not really. It was at the time, at least, not equipped to handle, stuff that she's talking about. But Elaine, it makes me think of the craft photographed by our dear colleague here, our late colleague Joe Ferrier from here in WOON Radio, who was a major UFO kind of expert in the 1960s, and then got out of it because he wanted his life to get back to normal. Because he was on our show, and he said things that he never said publicly before about the sightings. And the photographs he obtained look a lot like what Elaine is describing here, huh?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Shane, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen one shaped like that, but it certainly sounds like she saw something that wasn't, probably not from us, but especially when this seems like a long time ago, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about the 60s here, I think.
Yeah, so we didn't have anything that could go slow in the air, except for a blimp or a helicopter. So, but it's obviously not what she saw, and I've seen plenty of UFOs, but mine were always disc shaped or lights, or like that one we saw in Pennsylvania. But I've seen quite a few times, but never an odd shaped one like that. But I know plenty of people who have.
Yeah. Well, the question arises, too, why are there so many kinds of craft? We brought this question up before. They range all the way from these obviously nuts and bolts sorts of things all the way to just balls of light, as in Marley Woods, and our good friend, the late Ted Phillips, had documented lots of those things. And his opinion was that the technology of whoever owns these things was advancing from the nuts and bolts to something else, or there were many different civilizations visiting us, or many other explanations that might amount to military hardware that we didn't know about. Where the military, as far as research and development is concerned, is about 10 years ahead of what the public knows. All right, so these are all things that are possible. So really, it's a matter of kind of who knows what these are, but. I'm intrigued by Elaine's reference to a lot of people having their first UFO experiences at the age of 12. I never paid much attention to that. I'll have to look back in records. Maybe you could do the same, Shane, and see if there's any reference to that sort of thing among witnesses that we're aware of. But it's an interesting idea. I'm thinking of Joe Ferrier here from the station, and he had experiences that he never talked about except on our show, and one when he was like 4. So that was before, obviously, 12. So I don't know, but that's something I think really worth looking into.
As far as the UFO sightings, the age, I've never heard anything like that. But I'll tell you, just to kind of like support that a little bit, a very common age for people to have experiences with like alien or abduction experiences start at 7.
Yeah.
With my experience with that stuff started at 7. But then, like Mike Stevens too, he has memories at age 3, and I had experiences at age 3 that, in now retrospect, looking back at it, may very well have been what I started experiencing at 7. It just was a little different. So, but yeah, so 7 is a very common age for that experience. So there just might be, for seeing UFOs, an age.
From what I remember of my son here, I know he doesn't like to talk about this a lot, but he was talking about experiences as early as he could talk. I don't know about you, not necessarily seeing UFOs or anything, but various.
I didn't file any reports of MUFON. That's what you're asking.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, so here is I think time one more quick just report, I might say, and there is on the Behind the Paranormal website a form people can fill out to report paranormal experiences of any kind, and we're going to put one as well on the New England Ghosts site, which is ridiculously out of date. I don't think it's been updated in 10 years. And we're going to, that's being redesigned finally. But there are ways for people to report these things to us other than sending emails. And this is, I guess if you want to, just this part down here, Ben, this is from Margaret in North Carolina. Interesting report.
Just the bottom portion?
Yeah, just a paragraph on the right there, yeah.
Okay. Sitting on my couch watching TV, I see in the corner by the TV an entity that is black, although somewhat transparent, with wings, about the same size as a cat. It is flapping its wings, which looks kind of like a cross between a butterfly and a bird. No eyes. My cat saw it as well and went after it, but it just vanished. It wanted me to see it.
Wasn't that interesting? Shane, have you ever heard of anything like that?
Not necessarily like that, but I've heard of people seeing like dark entities with like wings, but nothing small like that. It's usually been like a decent size.
Yeah.
But so but that's how these parasites are. Whatever's going to get you, whatever's going to strike your nerve, they'll show up in whatever way that it's going to take. So I'm not sure.
What I found interesting too in this, among other things, was the actual cat was not afraid of it. Usually, they freak, they jump, they're hanging from the ceiling by their claws, and they run out of the room. It's very unusual that a cat would respond in a predatory manner to something like this.
Well, I mean, an interesting thing that just reminded me of when Marion and I were living at her mother-in-law's place. It was 100% parasite activity there. No question about it. No doubts in my mind. That's what was going on there. And I remember we would bring our cat at the time, who was probably like 1.5, 2. Nah, she wasn't even 2. She was probably about she was about a year old.
Clementine.
Yeah, we would bring Clementine. We would bring her into our room at night and close the door, because at night she would chase something all over the house. And it was like, you could hear her just running back and forth in the upstairs hallway for like a good hour. I don't know what she was doing, if she was being chased, if she was doing the chasing, but it was always in the same spot. So we would just bring her into our room at night, because it was like, hey, this is probably very stressful for you.
I remember that house, gorgeous, big house, but weird.
Oh boy, did it have a lot of problems.
Yeah, good thing you got out of there.
Yes.
Anyway, there we have back to animals. I guess we'll come full circle. Okay, I think we have probably better get to our announcements, because we have a lot of them.
Oh boy.
But thank you, Elaine, Margaret, for reporting that, and Elaine and everyone who wrote in today.
Yeah, really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, let's sort of hop into the deep end here. As we have announced on recent shows, the 2020 Exeter UFO Festival on Labor Day weekend has been canceled. But the 55th anniversary of the incident at Exeter will not go unsung on the show. On September 6th, the day that we would have had the broadcast from the the historic Exeter Town Hall with a panel of speakers for the 5th year in a row, we will do a rebroadcast of last year's panel show from there. On the panel, along with Kathleen Martin, Peter Robbins, Mac Maloney, Mike Stevens, the Allagash UFO abductees, and many other luminaries in the UFO field.
Now, on September 7th, as we've been saying, it's Labor Day in the United States. Ben and I will be on the Travel Channel as part of the debut of The Devil's Road, the true story of Ed and Lorraine Warren. That's first in a new series of 2-hour documentaries entitled America's True Horror Stories, and also Shock Docs. Docs as in documentary. So I don't know how shocking they'll be, but we'll see. Anyway, I'm in it as someone who worked with the Warrens, and Ben is there to represent a new generation of researchers. And again, that's the Travel Channel, 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday, September 7th, 2020.
Yes, and so the Western Connecticut UFO Conference will take place via Facebook Live on Saturday and Sunday, October 17th and the 18th. This is a free annual event sponsored by the Danbury, Connecticut Public Library, along with ourselves. Speakers will include our very own Shane Sirois here with us, and Mark D'Antonio, along with Linda Zimmerman, Mike Panicello. Is it cello? I always forget if it's 2 C's.
Yes.
Mike Panicello of Connecticut and MUFON, and more. On Sunday, we will simulcast our show from here on WOON with our special guest, Dr. Bill Burns of the UFO Hunters TV show, New York Times bestselling author, and publisher of UFO Magazine.
Yeah, the organizers are pretty excited about that. That'll be the anchor for the Sunday event anyway. Additionally, we have word that the New England Parafest will take place on April 10th and 11th, 2021 in Kittery, Maine. And that's our good friend Tom Spitaleri was organizing that. He's the eternal optimist, I mean, as far as live in-person events are concerned. But anyway, let's hope that happens, and we will do a live broadcast of this show with a panel of the speakers on Sunday the 11th. More information will be forthcoming. That might, in a way, kind of make up for not doing the Exeter Festival this year. People look forward to that.
We'll
panel
do more broadcasts everywhere we go.
Yeah, well, we do. So, Shane, what's going on with you? You've been on the radio a lot lately, huh?
Yeah, man. Oh, man. Yeah.
They love you, Shane. They love you.
I got more scheduled too, I'll post those. But yeah, and I get the two conferences, the Parafest in April, and then the Western Connecticut one in October. And other than that, yeah, all the shows I've been doing and remodeling my house has been a task. But we just finished. We just finished the bathroom, and
Well, you need to remodel my house too at some point when you get the chance. All right, great. Okay, so Ben?
Yes, you can check out our books along with those of our other co-hosts at our show website, behindtheparanormal.com, where you can also find out more about the show, our many cases over the years, our public appearances, and how to book us, along with some of our 850 free recorded shows from our 12-plus years on the air, including our 4.5-year run on CBS Radio, along with special shows and podcasts. All the past shows back to late 2009 are also available on major podcast platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, the Paranormal Radio app, Spotify, and many more. Please be so kind as to give us a little rating if you have the option to. That would be very good for us, not only for our self-esteem, but also kind of helps grow the show as well. And you can check us out on all of those.
I like the comment that sort of being on a cute little radio station like this actually kind of adds to the ambiance of the show. That was
unintentional
nice.
Ambiance.
Well, that was a nice thought. So we're also working on another book with Shane and perhaps one or two other co-authors here, and that is Behind the Paranormal 3, Uneasy Skies. We speak at all these UFO conventions, and we've never written a book specifically about that subject.
That's
here
a very
it comes.
good point.
Yeah. So we're hoping to have that out by spring. Okay, so there are links to several charities we have adopted on the show, including USA Cares, Canadian Veterans Advocacy, Helping Haiti's Orphans, Youth Mentoring Connection in Los Angeles, and Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, and the Sisterhood of Ground Zero, along with the Milk Fund here in Northern Rhode Island. So please check those out. We know the people who run those charities, and the money goes where it should, not just for administration and postage and things of that kind. All right. So, Ben, what we have in store for next week?
Well, next week we have, let me give the date first. That'd probably be helpful. August 30th, author and researcher and former military intelligence officer Dr. Kevin Randall will join us for an in-depth look at Project Blue Book, which I don't think we've ever really done an in-depth look on before.
Not specific, only with Stanton Friedman, but that was a long time ago.
It was a very long time ago.
It was before the infamous or famous series came out on the History Channel, which was not well received by anybody I know in this field. Including Nick Redfern.
I feel like if anything has billboards anywhere on a highway that's promoting something, I don't think I could find myself getting behind it. Because there were billboards on the Mass Pike going to Boston for it. I remember that.
What?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think you're right about that. Anyway, we leave you today with a thought from that old darling Albert Einstein. To raise new questions, new possibilities, to regard old problems from a new angle requires creative imagination and marks real advance in science. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno.
And I'm Shane Sirois. Thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we'll see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.